If you're a fan of math, this is the lesson for you. And of course, math is always the underlying part of programming. In the earlier lessons, we saw we can declare a variable. We can take that variable and we can use an assignment operator, which is the equal sign, and assign a value to that variable. And then that variable going forward will have that value until we change that value. There's also a number of other ways that we can make some updates to those values. And we've got a lot of different operators that we can use. So if you are familiar with math, you are aware, obviously, of addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and so on. So let's go take a look at how those work into JavaScript. So I can take value of 5, add it together with 5, and that's a typical math operator, the plus sign. I can also do 5 minus 3 and subtract it. So that's the minus sign. I can do 5 times 4, and that's the multiplication. So it's not the x, it's the little asterisk, which is shift 8. And there's also 20 divided by 5. So that's the forward slash is the division, and then we can get a value to that. So those are the typical math operators that you could use. You could also use increments as well. So we know that our variable a has a value of 400. So if I take a, I can quickly do a equals a plus 1, and so that will give us a value of 400. And there's actually a shorter way to do that. So if I just want to increment by 1, I could do a plus plus, and that will allow me to increment it by 1. So now when I look at the value of a, it's 402. I can also do plus plus a, and that immediately returns back 403, and the result is that a is 403. So if you put the pluses after, the immediate returned value is still going to be 401 because the way that it reads it is from the left-hand side. So A will get 401, and then we add in the operators. And when you're writing it within your code, it's actually going to be the same way. So as long as you're doing the statement there, it will increment it by 1, and then that new value of A going forward is going to be 403 or whatever value you've assigned to it. There's also a few other ones to be aware of that are typically used within math. So we've got one that's called modulus, and that's just represented with the number sign. So we have a value, and we can take the modulus, which is percentage, 3, and we see that it's returning back a value of 2. So what do you think that is? And the way that modulus works is it essentially returns back the remainder. So if we do 20 divided by 3, so we can fit in 6 3 times into 20, and 6 times 3 is 18, which gives us a remainder of 2. So basically, if we do something like 12 modulus 3, we get a remainder of 0 because we know that 3 times 4 is 12, and we can divide 12 by 3 and we have no remainder. So if you use something like 13, then we get a value of 1 as the remainder. And this is also a quick way to tell if the number that you're working with is odd or even, because we see that all of the odd ones get a remainder of 1, whereas the even ones get no remainder. So that's a quick way to use modulus, and you'll encounter that as well. It's another really useful part of JavaScript. So let's go back into our coding and let's set up some variables. So we're going to set a variable a equals 5, and then we're going to also, so we saw that we did that assignment value. So if we take variable b and we want to assign whatever the value of a is plus 5, we can do it this way. And so now b will have a value of 10. So let's add that in. So we can use all of those operators here within our coding. B a value of 30, the value of b. So what do you think our new total for a is going to be? So a is going to be now 35. Because what we've done is we've used the equal sign, and that's important because that's assigning a new value to b. So what's happening here is this is essentially the same thing. So a equals a plus b. So essentially that's what we're writing. And again, this is that shorter format that we just saw earlier in order to make those and write that content. So one other thing I want to note before we end up and close off this lesson when we're looking at operators. So we've seen that the equal sign equates one value to the other, and we saw that the plus equals is a shorthand format for this one here. Now there is another one as well, so if we do something like A and we do 2 equal signs to B, we see that a Boolean value is being returned back. And this is what's known as a comparison operator. So these work a little bit different, where we compare the two values, so the value of A and the value of B, and we see that if it's equal. We can also do something like we can put a number in there, and until we get the right number, we're not going to get the value of A being equal. So the value of A, I believe, right now is 65. So until we say 65, and that's because we've updated it here within these statements. Initially it was still 5, but we made the updates to it. So until we actually get the value of it, then we see the true being returned back, and that's that Boolean value. We can also use the less than symbol and the greater than, of course. So we can do A is less than, so this is comparison operator, which is different than the assignment operator. So we can see, is A less than 50? Is A less than 100? Is A less than 1500? And it's always true. So A is not less than 1. We can also do greater than. So we can do, is A greater than 1? True. Is A greater than 50? True. Is A greater than 500? False. Because remember, again, the value of A is 65. And we are going to be looking at these comparison operators in greater detail later on, as it's going to become more relevant and more important in the later lessons. So for now, take what you've learned in this lesson, try it out for yourself, try the different math operators, add some values together, and usually I would suggest that the best place to do it within the console, play around with the numbers, and just get familiar with what's getting returned. Another thing too to get familiar with is how you're assigning values. So you could do something like variable C is equal to A greater than 500, and now if we do C, it's being returned back false. Because remember, whatever we're assigning that value to is going to be whatever the end result of this equation is going to be. And what we get back within the console anyway is undefined, but we do have a number and we do have a value that's being returned back there, and that's false. And we saw that played out earlier on within these statements, where we saw that that was being returned back false. And again, there's going to be more on this later on within the upcoming lessons. So in this lesson, just get familiar with the variables and how to use them.